I always like to create an environment where people feel comfortable to ask questions. You don't always know what you don't know. You may not have it all figured out today, and that's okay. Taking one step at a time, those glimmers become a consistent light. It all finally begins to click. Each and every moment that you experience is shaping the person you are in this life to be.
Sometimes our pain points go all the way back to childhood.
What if I allowed myself to imagine a life that was more spacious and expansive than the one I'm living?
What if I don't have to live the same way that everyone else is living?
When you are authentic, your energy changes and the people around you change. It's just like doors just start opening. You're like, well, wait, how did this happen? How did this happen? How did this happen? You're showing up completely different.
And often it does require healing and going in some uncomfortable spaces before we can truly flourish.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me for Let's Chat. My name is Shayla Reaves, and we have an awesome group of ladies here tonight to talk about a topic that really impacts people no matter where you are in life. Sometimes when you're moving forward or you're trying to move forward and you have those longtime friendships that you hoped would move along with you, sometimes the folks that you thought would be there, maybe they aren't able to be there for you in the same way. And you're kind of grieving that lost connection, that lost hope that that friendship would move with you no matter what phase of life you were in. So I thought this would be a great conversation to have, the cost of personal growth. that kind of tug of war that you have with moving forward, but then also grieving the loss of a friendship or a connection that you hoped would be there and be supportive for you as you move ahead. So today, joining us for this conversation, we've got an awesome group of ladies. I'll quickly show you here. We've got Shelby M. Wagner, Personal Development Catalyst podcast host for Catalyst for Conversation. We have Dr. Zakia Robbins-McNeal, a professor, therapist, and author, and Jessica Horton, a certified life coach practitioner, life strategist, and speaker, will all be joining us. And I'll go ahead and bring everyone up here so you can meet our awesome group. This is Shelby. Then we'll add Dr. Zakia Robbins-McNeal. And last but not least, Jessica Horton. Thank you all so much for joining me today.
Of course. Thank you for having us.
Yes. And I'll start with you, Jessica. Just tell us a little bit about who you are, and then we'll launch into the conversation once we go through Dr. Zakia and Shelby as well.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much again for having me. I am Jessica Horton. I am a former, I don't even like to say former, I am a event planner by trade. So I spent the last 15 plus years in corporate event planning. For most of my career, it was with in a corporation. And then for about the last 7 years, I ran my own freelance event planning company. And then, like so many people in the hospitality and events industry, when the pandemic hit in March of 2020, I got to remember the dates, all of my business went away. I was booked out the entire year and just really forced to pivot and change directions on what I was going to do. So I had always been really fascinated and intrigued by this world of coaching. And I often say that COVID or the pandemic was really such a blessing in my life. Not lost on me the tragedy that the pandemic really was for so many people, but in so many ways for me, it really just allowed me that space and time to get clarity on what I wanted to do next. And that landed me in this awesome world of coaching. And I am here and not looking back.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. And Dr. Z, tell us a little bit about who you are as well.
Hello, Dr. Zakia Robbins-McNeal. I'm a therapist by trade. I am an author, a professor, and an accountability coach. So that is me in a nutshell. That's the quickest way. That's the quickest way.
Thanks so much, Dr. Z. And Shelby, tell us a little bit about who you are as well.
Yes. Hello, I'm Shelby Wagner. I'm a personal development catalyst, as I like to call myself. I really like being the person who initiates, growth and evolution. And so with Catalyst for Conversation, my business, really, I can spark conversation anywhere, one-on-one, individually, or in group settings. And for me, it's all about us recognizing, our best identities, our truest identities, so we can show up and deliver authentically, love authentically, and grow authentically, and create a better world. And so I think the best way to do that is by knowing ourselves and knowing each other. And I think conversation and development drives that.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, ladies, so much. So I really wanted to have this conversation because I feel like in all of our lives at some point, we have our friends that we think are going to be there for everything. And then you kind of hit this road where maybe the folks that you thought were going to be there or be supportive weren't. And then you're like, wait a minute, well, who am I when they're not here? And it can be kind of a tricky space to be in. And so I wanted to create space to dialogue about this because I think it's something that a lot of people have to navigate. Dr. Z, what would you like to get us started?
Yeah. So, because I've actually had that happen. You think that people will be around for, years, but that cliche, reason, season, lifetime. I actually had to live that a few times. And, few friends are, I won't even say no longer friends anymore. They're just not here in this season of my life. And the thing is, they are probably going through other things in their life too, where we kind of needed to separate. And it's totally okay. But it takes some people a long time to get there. some people look at it as a negative thing as opposed to it just being what it is. You know, it's not good nor bad. Sometimes people get stuck in the, well, why aren't they here, and trying to pinpoint what other people are doing wrong or why is something going wrong, as opposed to looking at it as this just is what it is.
Right. And Shelby, would you like to add on to that?
Yeah, I think when you actually were asking this question, you know, I don't feel like I've had to let go of anyone as much as I think the harder piece is setting new boundaries and establishing a new way of being with friends in life, as I've embarked on some personal growth and letting go of some old ways. I think that's been the more challenging piece, is saying, okay, I'm no longer the person who is you know, striving to get that title or achieve that paycheck. I have different priorities now as far as what's valuable to me. And so I think thinking about it, just as we're talking now, I think the more challenging piece is establishing those new boundaries, or kind of like what, I don't know, just like, who are we now in this relationship together?
Right. And as you grow, maybe your friends are like, your growth pattern may be different than that of your immediate friend circle. So maybe what you need is different from what they need, and you can't really expect people to be in a place where they're not, or that you can't have the expectation that your growth pattern will be the same one that they need or have. And so they may just not be able to grow in the way that you are. Sort of like Dr. Z was saying as well, just about seasons. And maybe some people are not able to be in the season that you're in, or the season that you're moving to. Jessica, would you like to add as well?
Yeah, I think so many good things said there. I think it really, so I've too gone through that season of people just aren't, in my mind, I felt like they weren't what I needed them to be for me. So it wasn't so much that they were doing anything wrong or they were growing not along with me. We were just growing differently. And I had to almost grieve and go through that process of letting go of some of that, and not necessarily letting go of that friendship, but letting go of my expectations of what I thought that friendship needed to be for me. So there was a lot of growth and a lot of grieving, I would say mostly for me within the last year.
Yeah. And it can be so tough because you don't want to stop moving forward, because whatever path you're on may feel like the path that's most authentically you. And maybe sometimes we do have expectations for the people in our lives that, I don't know that you would say they're necessarily maybe they're unrealistic expectations, or maybe the expectations that we have for them are not taking into consideration the reality of who they are and how they exist in our lives. And maybe how they exist in our lives now is how they're supposed to be in our lives. And maybe we want them to be more than what they are, because you know, maybe we're seeking more than what we are in our own lives to some extent. What would you say, Dr. Z?
So the pandemic, it's funny that you mentioned that, Jessica. The pandemic has changed a lot of people. It is forced people to take a lot of things into perspective. So as we are changing, so are our friends, so is everyone around us. So I think, Jessica, what you were talking about is more of an assumption that people will continue to be there and grow with you. They could be happy for you that you are growing and changing. However, in their growth and in their change and in them doing what they need to do for them, maybe they need to show up differently for themselves. So it takes away from your friendship a little bit. And again, not in a negative way. You know, my thing is, my girls, they riding with me. We going together. But sometimes things just shift for everybody at the same exact time, and they need to show up for themselves more or differently than they have shown up for themselves in the past. And that will sometimes kind of cause people to go in different directions. You know, maybe they're looking at, you know, focusing on this aspect of their life, but you're focusing on something different, and you both have to be pulled into different directions. And It's not even necessarily a bad thing. It just is. But you do go through a grieving process, just like you said, regardless of why you're going in the two different directions.
Yes, and I guess if we talk a little bit more about the grieving, acknowledging how you feel, it's okay to be sad. I mean, it's a change, and sometimes change can feel tricky, it can feel painful, it can feel uncomfortable. And in this case, maybe that's okay, and allowing yourself to experience that. Do you think, Shelby?
Yeah, I think definitely. And I think maybe that's maybe one of the more surprising aspects of growing and changing and doing so in ways that are different maybe than the people around you is that grieving process of letting go and things not looking the way that you thought they were going to look. I know for myself, I almost was in a similar situation to Jessica, except mine was more planned in that I left my corporate job in February of 2020, not knowing what was coming, to start my own business. And I really had to take that year to grieve and let go of kind of that status of working in tech and having a title and a certain, level of income and a lot of things that like kind of had wrapped up in my identity. And like recognizing that it's okay to like grieve the letting go of that and to be able to sit with it so it doesn't, come back to bite me 3 years later, because I haven't faced it and dealt with it and talked about it. And I think it's also just beautiful to sit with it because other people, if you're engaging with your friends and family about it, can learn too.
Absolutely. And I want to share some of the comments that we received. Ty says everyone's growth rate is definitely different and it's okay. You just have to acknowledge it. And then she goes on to say, it's hard because our friends are our comfort zones, especially those who have been there for a while. And sometimes when you allow yourself to take that time to grieve, thank you, Ty, for sharing that.
Look, I'm like, I know her. It's Tay.
Hey, thank you. Sorry, Tay. Thank you for your comments, Tay. And thank you for correcting me, Dr. Z. Nikki also saying, hey, beautiful ladies. And Ra saying, Jessica Horton.
Hey, girl.
Yeah. I just was going to say there, like sometimes once you grieve and then you kind of come to terms with the fact, okay, this relationship is different. Sometimes you can come back and still be friends, but your expectations for each other and your friendship have evolved and you've learned how to coexist in the new space. But you have to sometimes give yourself time just to kind of process, where you are or where you're growing to, and then, mourn whatever it is that you were, embrace where you're going, and then hope that if those relationships were meant to be, they'll come back in their new form, in your new place, in your new space. Jessica, would you like to add on?
Yeah, I just wanted to go back really quick to, is it Tay or Ty? I didn't hear it.
Ty. Tay?
Tay's comment just about that piece about comfort zones, I think is so important, and just about how our friends really are such a comfort for us. But as we are walking through this new space and that personal growth, a really big part, one of the biggest parts, I believe, of personal growth is stretching yourself outside that comfort zone, right? So when you are going through these changes, you are sometimes having to let go of some things that maybe are making you feel comfortable, making you feel safe in order to stretch you to that new space and that new level.
Absolutely. And let's see, I'm trying to make sure I'm not missing any comments here. Yeah. And it seems like the piece that we continue to come back to is just this idea. I mean, you're going to have to feel uncomfortable, but with growth, there is discomfort. And sometimes you have to allow yourself to live in that space. And it takes courage to work through those feelings sometimes, because sometimes to work through the pain that's, why you feel the way you feel and why you're grieving, like what's the underlying reason for that? You might have to go into some dark places and figure out why you have the attachments that you do have, and allow yourself to be in that place of discomfort so that you can understand the feeling, so that you can grow beyond it and not sort of be held hostage by that. Like, okay, there's this door over here. I just don't want to open it. I'm just going to keep living over here. But the longer you avoid it, it's still there. It's not going anywhere, and it'll keep showing up one way or the other. Would you say, Dr. Z?
Yes, indeed. So, I like to think of like change is changing life in general. Just as the day changes, just as the months change, just as the season changes, people are entitled to change and grow and do different. So releasing expectations of what we feel other people should do and should be in our lives, I think that kind of answers a lot of it for people. But not everybody understands how to do that easy, because it's not an easy thing to do. It's just like you got, as Tay said, you got comfortable with having this person by your side, and it's like they're there more than likely day in, day out, day in, day out. But sometimes things change and they need to veer off a little bit, and it might not even have anything to do with you. It literally might not have anything to do with you. It's just what they need to do for themselves. But releasing expectations of how we expect people to show up in our life kind of helps break that gunkiness a little bit.
Yeah.
Because we're only, and Tay will say, I always say, worry about yourself. In everything, you have to worry about yourself, because you can't have assumptions or expectations for other people, even though they have been that for us for so long. There is a time when that may change, and we may not even see it coming. Mm-hmm. But releasing the expectation kind of helps in these situations.
Absolutely. And as we push forward into whatever our new chapter is, I mean, the journey to embracing who you really are, and what does my growth look like? Who am I in this new space? As I figure out whatever my personal calling is, having the courage to take that journey it is a journey that takes courage, and sometimes just acknowledging, oh my gosh, like the thing I want to do most, or the thing that feels most like me, is going to require me to step out of this space where all of my comforts lie. Like all of the people that understand me, or I feel understand the person that I am now, are here. All the things that I feel, represent who I am and where I am are here. But to get to a level that even feels more real and more me, I may have to give up these comforts to go to a space where maybe there aren't a lot of things that I recognize in that space, but I need to have the courage to move there, to grow, and to become, what maybe on the inside feels like the realest part of me. And to inhabit that space will require you to really evaluate maybe some of the friendships, some of the connections, some of the relationships you've had, and how you've allowed them to exist in your life, and whether or not the way that they are existing in your life is the best way for them to exist, for you to be able to reach your most authentic self, the truest version of who you are. And maybe those relationships have to change for you to be able to do that. Shelby, would you like to add?
Yeah, I think, like you said, it's really having an awareness of, where are you headed, and what are some of those uncomfortable areas, and being willing to look at that. And one question I know that always stands out for me is like, who are you willing to disappoint on your journey to becoming yourself? I think that's always a telling question, because I think there are a lot of people that are close to us that we have some blind spots about, holding ourselves back, and a little bit of that expectation piece that we've talked about. And sometimes it's not even spoken, that someone's holding you back, but you have some thoughts about their disappointment and things like that. And so I think it's even just examining what are some of those stories that you have told yourself about the people in your life supporting you on where you want to go, and really looking at what stories have you told yourself about, where you are headed, and the dangers that you think might lie ahead, and the challenges that you think you can't face.
Oh, sorry. That's such a powerful question. Who are you willing to disappoint? And I think I don't think I've ever asked myself that. That's a great point. It's something when we think about it, so much of how we live and the people around us, we're always cognizant of, well, if I do this, this person's going to feel this way. If I do that, somebody's going to feel this way. Well, who are you when you live in the world and you're, what if you were able to push all those expectations aside and just be like, who would you be if you weren't worried about those expectations? That's such a great point. I appreciate you making that. Jessica, would you like to add?
Oh, I wrote down that question, Shelby. I love it. That's such a good one. But I do think it is so much around just really having that overall awareness of who you are and where you want to go. And really the starting point for that is getting really super crystal clear about what your values are right now, right? So a lot of us know what we value in life, what's important to us, but we haven't really done the work around why those values hold meaning to us and why they matter in our life. So sometimes it's more of not a talking point, but just family is important to me, friends are important to me, but why? What's the reason behind some of that importance? So I think that the awareness piece is so big. And then the other piece I just wanted to touch on quick is just around that fear, right? So when you're asking yourself that question around who are you willing to disappoint, a lot of times I think when we're thinking of making a change or doing something different, a lot of it is this cycle of fear in the back of our head about they're going to think this and they're not going to be there for me in the end. And all of these things that we kind of loop in our minds. And typically those fears are the least likely thing that's going to happen. So really getting kind of clear on what those fears are and what meaning they have.
So true. And we've got, let's see, I'm going to Tay. Worry about yourself. Hey, I'm going to get it. You can post again. So before we go forward, though, I do want to tell everyone, if you are watching and anything is resonating with you, please leave us a comment. If you have a question for Jessica, Shelby, or Dr. Z or myself, post that in the comments as well. And we'll definitely post them on the screen or try to address them with our panel today. What are some of the, I guess, if you were in a place of trying to really understand and process the grief that you have around these lost connections, where and how do you start? I mean, do you have to go in that quiet place by yourself and just really take inventory? Do you write? Like, how do you start the process of unpacking why you're grieving about these changes in your relationships? Who wants to go? Dr. Z?
Well, okay. Anytime you have an ill feeling about something that's going on, that's when you know you need to address it. So if you start to think like, oh, I'm feeling some kind of way that this person isn't doing this or this person isn't doing this, that's when you need to, one, take a step back and see what that is. Now, one, are you angry at them for them not showing up? Two, have you had the expectations or assumption that they will always be there for you? Or three, look, I'm like, was there a three? I can't even think of what one you feel was good enough. But literally, once you have an inkling of a feeling that you're feeling upset or angry about something, that means that is something that you need to address. That's where you start. It all starts with the feeling.
Mm-hmm. And then once you identify, okay, this is something that's bothering me, then you have to go through and ask yourself all those questions to get to the bottom of it. And sometimes the thing that you think that you're mad about is probably not what you're mad about. It may be some underlying thing that you're dealing with. And it's like addressing only the symptom, but not the root cause of the problem, right, Shelby?
Yeah. That made me think of the exercise where you ask yourself why 10 times and see where you get on that 10th one. Great. But yeah, it definitely is, as Dr. Z said, starting with those emotions and really digging into the feelings, which is probably the last place people usually want to go, unfortunately. But like, where's the discomfort, and asking why? Why is it bugging you? Is it an external discomfort or is it internal? And then I think also, as you just kind of asked originally, like where to start processing the grief, once you look at the emotions, then examine those relationships and really ask yourself which ones really are important. I think sometimes we keep dragging along relationships that really don't serve us anymore, aren't really giving us life, giving us energy. And so I think after examining your own personal, emotions of grief and why you're grieving and what you're grieving, looking at which relationships in your life are really going to support the new you and support you letting go of some of those things that you're grieving.
Absolutely. And Jessica, would you like to add on?
Yeah, I think oftentimes too, we tend to hold on to some of those relationships longer than we definitely should. I know I have. And a lot of that for me comes from that people pleasing mentality or not wanting to hurt the people around you. But I think when you do start getting that awareness, it's asking yourself that question, similar to Shelby's question about who are you willing to disappoint? It is, what are you willing to continue to sit in those feelings and be upset or angry or uncomfortable or not moving forward because you want to make them feel comfortable? Like, which one is more important to you? I think those are questions you need to be asking.
And yeah, and it can be tough if you're either a people pleaser or you're someone that just by your nature, you're used to caring about everyone else.
Mm-hmm.
It can feel uncomfortable to put yourself first, but sometimes you have to be in that position of putting yourself first in order to achieve your own potential and show up in the world in your most authentic way. And so it may feel like you're I don't want to step on anyone's toes, but sometimes you have to step on toes to show up as authentically as possible, because maybe the relationships that you have are the ones that are keeping you from achieving your best self in a way. Dr. Z?
Yep. So once you start to examine the relationships, it's like, what are you going to do about it? It's like, do you sit there and do you sulk? Or do you try to show up differently or examine, okay, so why am I mad at this? But it's like, okay, some people get stuck there, but you have to go through the cycle. So the next step in the process is doing something about it, not necessarily sitting there, but the onus comes back on you to go through the process and to continue moving. So once you finish going through all of that, what are you going to do next? Because it is about you, like it's your life. You can't focus on what other people are or are not doing. You now know that you feel some kind of way. Do you sit there and do you sulk, or do you try to figure out how to move past it? Mm-hmm. A lot of people get stuck in that sitting back and sulking and just sitting there wanting to feel miserable. But the growth happens when you get through that uncomfortable space. And now you're thinking about, what am I going to do next in my journey so that I'm not feeling this way again. So
what is the conversation that people should have with themselves if they are in that place of grieving the change? I mean, what's a way that you can look at that? I mean, growth, accepting the idea that growth is or can be painful. This is part of the journey, but reminding yourself that the journey that you're on, if it feels most like you, then you have to keep going and hope that the other pieces settle themselves out, but pay attention to whatever that voice is that feels the most like you. What do you say to someone that's trying to figure out, I'm stuck in that grief. What do I tell myself so that I can keep going in the path that feels like me? Shelby?
Yeah, I think, it's important to not rush any grieving of any kind. And so I think part of it is getting comfortable with being uncomfortable, and then asking yourself, what's one thing that I could do differently? So for myself, I'm all about experiments and small steps because they lead to big impact. And so I think it's still holding room for your grief on one side, and then asking yourself, what's one thing I'm willing to do different today to move me closer to where I want to be? And not making it be like such a huge shift, but taking those small steps.
And Jessica, would you like to add?
Yeah, I love that. Just about the small steps. I think it's just really paying attention to how you're feeling around certain people, right? Like continue to pay attention to that. So you've identified, I know that this person is not good for me, or they're not right in this part of my journey. Really start to tune into how you're feeling around them, and then how you're feeling around the people that might be right for you in that journey. I think just really having that sense of awareness about what things fuel you, what things drain you, is really going to help along the process.
That's so true. And another aspect of this, when the conversation topic came up, it was centered around people that were kind of navigating changes in employment, changes in jobs, changes in career, and not really feeling the support from the close connections that they thought would be there. But you could also have this conversation when it comes to dealing with loss. I just was talking to a friend today who lost her husband because of COVID. And there were a lot of people that said, oh, I'm going to be there for you. Just let me know if you need something, if you need anything. And the people that said that, some of them were no-shows. But then the people that she didn't expect to show up showed up in a major way. And so this kind of dynamic can exist not only in your professional life, but it can also exist when you're grieving too, right? Dr. Z?
Yep. Yeah. Because I actually remember having a conversation with you when this topic, when we were thinking about it. It's like, oh, people say they're going to be there, but then they don't. And, if you look at it differently, it could be that, they want to show up, but they don't know how, even though, they have every intention of showing up, but showing up forces them to have to deal with a grieving friend, which they may not have the capacity to deal with. You see how we take it away and we're just like, oh, well, maybe it's not really about me. Maybe they're actually going through something. Maybe they do not know how to show up for me. Maybe them showing up is going to make you worse. Because sometimes that happens too. Where it's like they're just coming and they're bawling, and then just like, wait a minute, I was actually okay. When you came in here and then you made me worse. That has happened too, So again, it's just, life happens, people go away. But I can go over it time and time again. Once you put it out there that you probably need to change the people that are around you, as Jessica has stated, the people that you need will start to show up.
Right.
Because you've taken the step to even try to think about doing something differently.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I always feel like whenever you do more of the things that feel the most like you deep down, who you authentically are, you show up more authentically in the world. And when you're showing up as your most real version of yourself, you attract more of that energy because you're happiest, you're the most pleasant, you're the most you. When you are doing the things that you genuinely love, and people respond to that, and before you know it, your circle is expanding with all these new faces that you're like, I don't know where they came from, but they're coming and they're the people that you may really actually need in your life, because the radiance of who you genuinely are is shining and attracting those folks into your world. Shelby, did you want to add on to what Dr. Z was saying as well?
Yeah, I think just, I think there was a piece on capacity that caught my ear too, is just remembering that not everyone has the capacity to be that person that you need in moments of growth or grieving, and to sometimes give people some grace to come alongside you. And I think what helps is us being willing to be vulnerable about what it is we're going through, and being able to name how others could help us would be helpful too. Because when you're bringing up emotions that might be uncomfortable for someone else to be there with you, it could be helpful to say, well, here's what I need from you right now. Even though I'm crying and I'm a hot mess, I just need you to go to lunch with me on Friday, to just give people some frame of reference of, even though there's a lot going on right now, here's what would be helpful from you. So they can maybe come with you better on the journey too.
Absolutely. Jessica, would you like to add?
Yeah, I think that is such a great point. It really makes me think of last summer, just around when everything was happening with George Floyd. and the murder of George Floyd, and just the feelings that I felt about close family and friends and people, loved ones, that I had this expectation that they would show up for me in a way that was right for me. And what I've realized in the last year is that some of them didn't have the capacity to do that or know how I needed them to show up. So my expectation was that they just know, how you're supposed to show up for your friend in this moment. But we'll say a lot of the circle around me and family, friends are all white people. And so for them too, they don't know how to show up. Many of them did not know how to show up for me. So I think really, one, giving people that grace to know that they don't always know what's right and they don't have the capacity to do it, but also clearly communicating what you need from people. So sometimes we don't even know what we need, but just communicating whatever you can in that moment to share with them how you need them to show up in your life, because often people don't know.
That is so true. And we have expectations for, like, what do you mean you don't get this? But sometimes they genuinely don't. And maybe you have to give yourself the time to be in a space where you can have a conversation and explain it. It may not be in that moment that you're in. It may be, maybe you have to give yourself some time to deal with, what you're feeling, and then come back. And then once you're in a better space to be able to talk and hear, then you can do that. But you don't have to figure it out all at once sometimes. And sometimes I think because the way we live, we want answers right now. We want to go on social media and see it right now. And sometimes those sort of expectations of immediacy translate into what we expect of people in our real lives. And they can't always be there for us in that way. I'll go ahead and share a couple of comments here. Let's see. Leslie. Hi, Leslie. Love you, Shayla. Proud of you, girl. Thanks for watching, Leslie. I appreciate you. A childhood friend. And we've got Natasha here, Jessica Horton, that part. And we have Kat here. How long do you continue giving more than you get from a friend? Maybe they're oblivious to how much they don't fill your friendship cup. Anybody want to take that one? Dr. Z?
I'm like, So here's the thing. I always say that you are at the beginning, middle, and end of every situation that you're going through. So you don't want to cut them off like immediately, because, say they don't answer the phone one time, right? They're actually busy. We don't have 100% access to everybody 100% of the time. But if you notice that person is like never there for you, I'll say like 5 times, maybe you start to think, or maybe you even have a conversation of, hey, is everything going on in your life, right? We don't automatically assume that they have to be there for us every single time, but we do owe our friends a conversation. Like, is everything going on in your life, where you're not trying to dump your situation onto them, but give people an opportunity to have a conversation with you, right? Like, I've been feeling like, you're not there for me as much as I need you to be, after, or at least, after you ask them if they're okay. You ask them if they're okay, if everything's going on in their life first. Then you have a conversation about how you feel like they're showing up for you. Then based on that, their response to that conversation, then that's where you start to assess whether it makes sense for you to keep reaching out to them, or for you to back off, But I say everyone is owed a conversation. Everyone is owed the opportunity, or should have the opportunity, to speak up for themselves without us making assumptions of how we feel like they should show up for us and that they should be better friends. We need to let them know what it looks like to be a friend for us.
That's so true. And it kind of reminds me, a couple of conversations I had recently with the school counselor. They were talking about how when the pandemic started, they had some kids that were showing up differently in the virtual remote learning space. They weren't paying attention as much. And so instead of addressing the issue of, grades or why aren't you paying attention, it's how are you? Like, how are you before you launch into I see you're not paying attention, and, kind of putting people in a position where they kind of close up and they feel like they have to come up with something versus just acknowledging them as a person and creating that rapport, and then moving from that space to see, okay, well, this person, this is what they're navigating behind the scenes that I can't see. And it's really not about the computer screen. It's really not about the grades. It's about, maybe I'm worried because my parents and their job situation is different, or maybe I have, siblings that are younger than me, and I can't really focus on school because I've got to worry about whether or not they're learning because my parents are frontline workers. And you've got all these other things that are going on, and it's really not even about the screen. It's about all these other pieces of life. And so I feel like the pandemic, we probably should kind of take the moment a little bit more and pause and say, how are you? Like, before we go into any conversation with anybody, because we all are fixated on our personal grievances, and we're like, we're coming at you today for this. And it's like, wait a minute, how are you? And then you kind of can see the space from which that person is working, and maybe there's a reason in what they're navigating that explains why they didn't get to what you needed, or they didn't call you back when they said they would, or they didn't reply to that text when you hoped that they would. And it can always be more to the story. Jessica, would you like to add?
Yeah, I think with that, there is a lot of fear tied to that too, right? Because we're so afraid of having that conversation. And yes, you want to check in with them and make sure they're okay. But I think it's always just that fear of having those authentic conversations with people. Going back to that question that was asked around, do you say something? Well, I think you have to decide, is it worth it to say something? Do I need to say something? Because sometimes we don't feel like we need to say something, or we don't need to speak up, but then understand what the consequence or the fallout of the silence could be, right? But I know, as I keep saying, as a people pleaser, as someone who does really hate confrontation, I don't ever want to do that. But I also know that that's the most important thing that I need to be doing if I want that resolution, right? You have to give them a chance to explain their side of it too. So.
And one of the things, I'll share this, Kat said in response earlier. Thank you, noted. Great conversation, ladies. One of the things that I noted for myself, because I've just, in trying to unpack lived life and understand how I show up in the world, I kind of learned about myself that I try a lot to fit all of me into other people's spaces. Mm-hmm. And so after a while, I said, who am I when I'm not trying to fit into everybody else's space? Mm-hmm. What do I genuinely like when I'm not just, factoring in everyone else's opinions? And the people that are in my life for the right reasons, if I have those difficult conversations and we disagree, and they're really in my life for the right reasons, they will still stay there. Even when we disagree, they'll sit through the disagreement and we'll reach a resolution. If you disagree with somebody and they leave, it doesn't mean that your opinion or your perspective is any less valid, or you are less valid or important as a person because they left. It's literally just a disagreement. And so it's like the learning how to not be afraid to show up, share how you feel, if it makes you unhappy, what someone else is doing, and not know that your unhappiness, like you're wrong for having shared it because someone left or they didn't process it in the way that you hoped. And so sometimes it's just like allowing yourself to have that space and know that, there's nothing wrong with you because you're grieving. There's nothing wrong with you if someone else left because they didn't understand your grief. Your grief itself, even if it's a grief over a lost connection or a change in a friendship or whatever, it's still valid. Something I did want to address, and we kind of talked about this a little bit earlier when we were talking about grief and COVID and people not being there in the way that you hoped. Sometimes people feel like it's the right thing to do to say, oh, do you need anything? Do you want something? But even as they're asking you that, because it feels like a pleasantry or an expectation that you should do that, they don't really have the capacity to take on what you're dealing with that they're offering to help you with. And so it's like they're offering it, but then you're like in this space where you really need help, but then you're talking to somebody that really doesn't have the capacity to take on what your pain is. And that can be tricky too to navigate. Would you say, Shelby?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's, having to have that self-awareness of what you really need and what other people are capable of doing, and being honest about that, and, not needing to go out of your way to hurt feelings to say, like, I don't think you can help me. But I think it's being able to have that awareness and recognition of who in your life might be able to show up for the days of grief, and who might be able to show up when you need to rewrite your resume, right? That all the people in your lives have different strengths and different capacities. And so I think it's having that awareness of who might be the right person, even though everyone's saying, I'd love to help.
Yeah. That's so true. So it's really kind of learning to understand your friends and your close connections and what are their strengths. Because maybe if you're going through something, like you said, maybe, this person over here, I know they have the capacity to sit with me in this moment, in this grief, and be there in the way that I need to be supported, versus this person over here. It's like, can you just go pick me up something for dinner? I know that you will run errands all day. You will bring me what I need. You can't sit with me in my grief, but you will go pick me up some dinners.
Right. I think on the flip side of that, though, it is making sure when you are offering up that help to others, that you are coming from an authentic, whole place too, like making sure that you have the capacity to show up for them the way you're asking, or just making sure you're communicating to them what you are able to give them. Because sometimes I think we don't get a clear picture on what's ours to hold. Like when someone's in a tough spot or someone's hurting, you want to be there for them. You want to support your friends. But when you're going through something or you're on your own journey, sometimes you don't have the capacity yourself to show up for them in that way. So just making sure when you're offering that support, that you're clear about what you're willing and able to give them as well.
And give yourself grace, because maybe you're going through something in your own life, and normally you might be the one that's showing up in a certain way for others, but maybe the load that you're carrying is too heavy, and maybe others may have that expectation of you to be there in the way that you always have. But sometimes you can't do it all, and you have to step back. And, hopefully the right people understand that you can't be there at that time, but knowing yourself and knowing, when to show up, when to walk away, when I can take on more, when I can't take on anything more, is part of, growth as well, I would think. Shelby?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's just being able to, again, have that awareness about your capacity. And I think one thing is just, it's being okay too if some things need to be set down or let go, or, if certain people in your life are not the right people to bring in at that time. I think it's being okay with setting those boundaries too, about who should have access to you during these times of growth, and, just being okay with that. I hear Jessica say she's a people pleaser, and I am more not a people pleaser. So I feel like I also want to be a voice of like, it's okay to tell people you're not the one to help me.
Right.
No, I'm not going to bend over backwards to help you. But so I think it's being okay with that, if that is not, if people in your life are not meant to be in that circle at that time.
That's so true. And Jessica, I'm like right on your wavelength, because I struggle with people pleasing too. And I strive to be more like you, Shelby. Like in my mind, I'm hoping to grow to be in that space. Like you're my aspiration. I know I am not there yet. So we got a couple of comments here, and we also have about like 5 or 6 minutes left. So anyone watching, if you would like to join in and talk, we're talking about the cost of personal growth. Feel free to leave a comment, or if you have any questions or anything, leave those as well, and we'll try to get those up in the next 5 or 6 minutes. Callie said, where is Miss Callie? Callie said, so important to fully understand the role people play in your lives. So true. And then Tay That's it, right, Dr. Z? Thank you, Tay. Based on what Jessica said, some people also do not have the capacity to show up emotionally if that's what you need, because they just don't know. And you have to know the limitations of others. That's so true. And then Natasha here says the key to so much of this is our ability to communicate in these difficult times. But sometimes these difficult times make it harder to communicate our needs. How do we overcome that? Jessica, would you like to take that one?
Oh, I will take it because that's my sister. So,
Oh, wonderful. Hi.
Hi, sis. I think that, gosh, you got me with a good one. I think that, so for me, communication is probably the hardest thing, right? Not at communicating this, but communicating in difficult, uncomfortable situations. So I think a big piece to that is really getting that awareness and clarity on your values. What is important to you? Because then you're going to realize what things are showing up for you that are important and what things you're able to release. So I think getting that clarity and having that awareness of what matters to you is a big piece of that. And then, like Shelby said, just small steps, right? Like, it doesn't have to be like, sit down, let's have this really tough conversation. Sometimes it can just be some of these small in-between moments, or taking that little step. I was reading Nedra Glover Twab's book on boundaries. Shelby, do you remember the name of that book? I can't think of it.
I know what you're talking about, but yeah.
Yeah, but I was reading that today, and it was talking just about, and this was really on anxiety and depression and things like that, but she was talking about just taking those small little steps, right? Like, if you have a hard time communicating something, maybe it's just as simple as saying, you got a meal at a restaurant, it wasn't great, or they didn't get it right. And normally you would just be like, no, I'm going to take it, it's fine. And just taking that little step to say, you know what, actually that was incorrect. Can you please, get me whatever I needed or whatever. But I think just if you take some of those small shifts and small steps, it'll almost build up that muscle memory of, yeah, I can do this. I can have those big, tough conversations. So small steps for sure.
So true. And we've got about, 3.5 minutes or so left. I want to give each of you a chance, if you could leave everyone with any final thoughts, if somebody is going through that kind of weird spot of, okay, I'm trying to grow, but my friendships are not where I hope they would be. What do you say to that person in that space about what they need to do for themselves, about where they are, and how they move forward? Shelby, you want to go first?
Sure. I think, what we've talked about tonight is sitting down, examining your emotions, getting out pen and paper or paint. I'm all about creativity too. And getting out, how are you feeling? Where are you at? And then when you're ready to look at those relationships, find a few people that you feel like you can trust and ask them to just listen. I think the challenge about communicating about things that are just bring discomfort or uncomfortable is that I think a large part of it is that we're going to have to answer questions, or that people are going to tell us what to do. And it just brings on another layer of overwhelm. So I think it's finding people that you trust and ask them, can you just listen? Here's what I'm feeling. Here's what I'm going through. So you can start to practice saying what's on your heart and what's on your mind. I think those are places to start to begin to have people in your life who are supporting you on the journey that you're going on.
All right. Wonderful. Dr. Z?
Yeah, so I always say you are at the beginning, middle, and end of everything that you are going through. So as Shelby has stated, start with the feeling, the whys. Why am I feeling this way? Why am I dealing with this? Why? When you're examining the relationships, make sure it's not because you aren't putting assumptions and expectations on people. Because then you need to check yourself again. That's where you are in the middle. And then start to try, as Shelby has stated, start to try to have those conversations. Make sure that you are reaching out to people not in an angry or mean or demeaning way. Make sure that you're reaching out with care and with grace, so that it is a conversation, more of a coffee table conversation and not a confrontation. And that makes it a little bit easier. It softens the blow when you're having a conversation. And then think about what you're going to do about it. once you get their reaction.
So true. Thank you so much, Dr. Z.
Yep.
And last but not least, Jessica, you get to wrap us up today.
All right. So I think the biggest thing is just really paying attention to how you're feeling when you're around certain people. When you're feeling your best, who are those people that are supporting you and who are around you? That's a big key for me. And I think also hang out with the people who are living on purpose. If you are on this personal growth journey and this change with your life, it can feel uncomfortable and it can feel messy. Surround yourself with people who are living their lives authentically, who are living their purpose and their truth, and that's going to rub off on you too, right? And then lastly, I will say just saying no to others and other things allows you to say yes to yourself, which is so important, and to the things that matter to you. So don't be afraid to do it, or be afraid and just move through the fear anyway.
Feel the fear and do it anyway. So important. Well, thank you, ladies, so much for joining us, and thank everyone for tuning in. I'm going to quickly share with everyone, if you're watching, we've got another great topic coming up next week for Let's Chat, and we're going to be talking about people who are creating space for conversation. So basically what I'm doing, they're doing it too in their own way. That'll be a conversation with Jasmine Stringer, speaker, lifestyle expert, and author; Jesse Ross, diversity, equity, and inclusion consultant, executive coach, international speaker; JC Lippold, community mover, wellness preacher; and Erica Jones, a diversity, equity, and inclusion leader and a yoga and meditation teacher. So I look forward to talking to them as well. And hopefully you'll continue to join the conversation. Let's Chat every Friday. And we're tackling different topics. The goal is to create space for people to hear some different perspectives. Maybe you're navigating some challenges in life and maybe you're not sure, how do I get through this? How do I get through that? So the purpose of this space is just to create a space where awesome people can come together, have conversations that maybe we have with our own individual friends, but have it in this space and hopefully encourage, connect, and inspire others on their journey to living their best life too. So thank you all so much for watching. If all of my awesome panelists could hang around here, I'm going to go ahead and end the broadcast, and I'll catch up with you backstage in just a moment. Take care, everyone. Have a great evening.
Night.